Okay. Well, welcome, folks, to the Penny Stamps Distinguished Speaker Series. And thank you, Andrew Rogers on the Barton organ. Some of you may have missed it. He started with some Irish tunes. I really enjoyed your opening, Danny Boy. So happy Halloween. We most certainly are at the edge of falling into the pit of darkness. To help matters along, don't forget to set your clocks back on Sunday. And yes, we can do this together. We are going to make it through this dark period, and we will come out in the light again. We have a wonderful person from Light to help us today. Today we present the Irish artist, teacher, and activist, Joe Caslin. Interestingly enough, I did a little looking back and thinking about the statistics of this because, you know, everybody's into data analyzing everything nowadays. And so I thought, wow, an Irishman in this speaker series. This has only ever happened once before. You know, we have folks from all over the world that come and grace our stage and join us all the time. But interesting that somehow in all the years of the Penny Stamp series, this is only the second Irish person to be with us. And very interesting is that the first Irish person that joined us was David O'Reilly back a number of years ago. And the date on which his visit and presentation fell was on St. Patrick's Day. And here, our second Irishman is with us on Halloween, both festival days and both Irish festival days. So here we are, you know, always trying to make it work. So thank you to our partners for their support today, the Institute for the Humanities, series partner Arts Engine, and Michigan Radio 91.7 FM. Just a couple quick announcements before we get moving along. The gratitude campaign table is in the lobby again this week. This is their students, Sky, Christoph, and Miles Honus are helping facilitate today. They had wonderful hats on. If you didn't see them on your way in, do check them out on your way out. Really lovely. We're taking this fall season to gather our thoughts and ideas about the series' impact, and we ask that if you have anything to share about the series, to please express yourself by sharing reflections in a written letter, which will be shared with the Stamps family. We only have 3 dates proper in our fall season left. So if you've been thinking about what you're going to write, just remember that. So we'll be taking letters for the next 3 weeks. We also, well, it's actually more than that, but anyway, the next 3 moments happening at the Michigan Theater. We also invite you to become a friend of the Penny Stamp series by joining us with your financial support to help us continue this legacy of what Penny has built here. And that information is also available in the lobby. And a big thank you to those of you who have already joined us. Wonderful. A reminder, we are hosting a special event, not one of the 3 that I mentioned, tomorrow evening, November 1st, 7 p.m. at the Bethlehem United Church, which is just a few short blocks from here. This is on 4th Street between William and Packard, an easy stroll, a wonderful, interesting space, and we're featuring John Cameron Mitchell, and we will also have an organist there. There's an organ in the space, so you can enjoy that. Also, you're encouraged to come in costume. John Cameron Mitchell himself is going to be awarding the best dressed, and he's got 2 pairs of tickets to his one-man show, Origin of Love, to give away tomorrow evening, 7 p.m., Bethlehem United Church. Next Thursday, just a note about next Thursday, we are presenting Marina Willer. She's a graphic designer extraordinaire, but she's also a filmmaker, and she has a feature film which we're going to be hosting after she gives her talk here. Her feature film called Red Trees. This is a personal story of her family's survival and escape to Brazil during the Nazi occupation of Prague. Her father was one of the last people to get out of Prague during World War II. This is going to be screened at 7:30 p.m. Following the talk. And because if you are here today or you're a regular Penny Stamps patron, you get a big deal on the ticket to go see the show. We worked out a deal with the Michigan Theater, so tickets are only $6, but you have to buy, and there's no fees, no service fee even, but you have to buy it online, not at the door, and you use the code WILLER, that's Marina's last name, Marina Willer. Willer is the code, so you can purchase your tickets online for that screening. And now, do silence your cell phones. We are going to have our regular Q&A, as per usual, in the screening room, out the doors to the left, down in the smaller theater, directly following the presentation here. And now a few words to foreground our guest today. I had the great fortune to run into Joe Caslin and his work for the first time last April. And I immediately, upon finding out about what he was doing, asked him to join us here. And I trust that he will inspire you today to realize your own potential power to influence a tangible change in the world through finding understanding and empathy for all peoples around you. He's known for his beautifully rendered pencil drawings, which manifest as street art. Designboom Magazine has described Caslin's work as towering works of art that appear like massive sketchbooks across the architecture of Ireland's cities. He is the recipient of the 2013 Association of Illustrators Award for New Talent in the Public Realm. He creates highly accessible work that engages directly with the social issues of modern Ireland. He confronts the subjects of suicide, drug addiction, economic marginalization, marriage equality, stigma and mental health, the Irish asylum system, institutional power, and most recently, sexual consent. Devoid of text and realized in stark monochrome, these figures of Caslin's murals both complement and change the world around them, compelling passersby to stop and stare, holding up a mirror to the kind of society that we are while asking us individually, what kind of society do we want to be part of? The figures that populate his murals are ordinary folks, regular individuals, and they become spokespeople for their own experience, reminding viewers of the challenges they as a population must face together, that we as a population, I should say. His project, Our Nation's Sons, aims to persuade entire communities to address the very real problem of young males' apathy and their mental well-being. And the title of one of his recent projects, which was installed in the National Gallery of Ireland, was an installation called Finding Power. And I find this title is so apt to Joe and to his work, because recently someone pointed out to me, there's only really two ways that you can gain power. And you can gain power through the leverage of having a lot of money, or you can gain power by connecting and inspiring people. And that power is very squarely possessed by Joe. Please welcome Joe Caslin.
My grandfather was a remarkable Shanachie. In Ireland, the word Shanachie means great storyteller or narrator. And my grandfather had a nickname for everyone. He used to call me Blackjack. Now, there were three main reasons to this name. The first was after the ghost of my great uncle, Jacob Caslin, who continues to haunt our family home 200 years later. The second was to simply highlight my jet black hair and eyes. But my favorite reason has to do with the connection to the card game Blackjack. As you know, if you score 21, you win. Now, small children in Ireland, when they're getting potty trained, are encouraged to use the words, I'm having a number 1 or a number 2. I'm sort of guessing it might be the same on this side of the world. So as a child, I had a desperate habit. Anyone that went to change my diaper or wipe my arse suffered an almighty soaking. I was like a piss fountain. Number 2 followed by number 1 whenever I was changed, hence the name Blackjack. Now, as a hormonal teenager, I once told my grandfather I hated that name, and he stopped using it. These words I deeply regret now and would do anything to hear that name just once more. So to honor him, I will tell you 7 stories. The first, when you think of Ireland, you think of leprechauns, ginger hair, Lucky Charms, pints of Guinness, and of course St. Patrick's Day. But I want to speak to you today of another Irish festival, one with a deeper and more ancient history. Do you know the history of Halloween lies in ancient Ireland? The 31st of October marks the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, or the darker half of the year. This pagan celebration is called Samhain in Ireland. It was believed that the boundary between this world and the other world became thin, and so could more easily be crossed on this day. Large fires were lit as flames held protective and cleansing powers. Wood was becoming wet, so it hissed and cracked and sparked, giving us the culture of firecrackers and bonfires. Slaughter was celebrated as cattle and other livestock were brought down from the summer pastures. The meat was cured, fermented, and smoked for the winter months ahead. Knives, axes, blood, animal skin, large pots of bones, meat, salt, herbs, and fat, stirred mainly by women, were all part of this process, giving us the idea of potions and witches. The souls of the dead were also thought to revisit their homes seeking hospitality. It was said that if a demon soul were to encounter something as gruesome looking as themselves, they would run away in terror, so people carved gruesome faces in vegetables to protect their homes, giving us pumpkin carving. Poems and tales were part of the festival and involved people going door to door in animal skins and carcasses, often reciting verses in exchange for food, thus trick or treat. Feasts and processions of people took place, at which the souls of our dead kin were beckoned to attend, and we continue this tradition in many of our towns. Our second story, trauma. 2011 was a turbulent year. The London riots began when a young life was taken. It sparked a fire and unleashed a ferocious energy of the downtrodden poor. The racially motivated killing of an unarmed African-American 17-year-old called Trayvon Martin took place. This could have been my son, stated President Obama in speech days after Trayvon's killing. Ultimately, the killer would profit by selling the gun for $250,000 5 years after shooting this boy. In 2011, Ireland was hit by recession. We have a small population, but 10% of our people emigrated in just 1 year. If you took the population of Michigan and multiplied it by 3, and you began to leave tomorrow from the US, that is what it was like. An entire generation missing. We lost our brightest and our best, and those left behind were bereft and found it very hard to cope. So I undertook a project called Our Nation's Sons. In essence, I ran away. And I ran away because 2011 was a very traumatic period for me. I had been a teacher for 5 years, and in those 5 years, I lost 5 of my students to suicide. That is an incredible number. Those are 5 faces of kids I will never see again. And being a teacher, you are in a strange sort of a place. You occupy a role that is both parent and both friend. As I said, I ran away. I left Ireland and went to Edinburgh in Scotland. I went back to academia and went on to study a master's in illustration. And through that master's, I began to install large drawings with no words right across the city. These drawings were very, very personal. I recruited young men from the city, and we went about installing these large works. This is one of my favorites. This is in a town on the west of Ireland called Galway. Now, where this position, or the position of this building is really, really important. I don't just come along and decide, oh, I'm going to stick up a drawing on the wall there, and that's good enough. This building itself was an old museum. It had fallen out of use, and just in the back corner, you can see the edge of the new museum building that was built. So this building had fallen out of use. It was smack bang right in the middle of a gathering point. Over along this side, just out of shot of the photograph, a river runs. It's one of the fastest flowing rivers that's in Europe, in a city. But it was really important that this piece went here. Over on this side, there was huge, big, towering residential buildings. So the vista, the view of the people and the view of the locality had moved from that quite low level, and people had forgotten about this building because there was other important structures that was around. And it was the perfect metaphor for what was happening for our young men in Ireland. They were being left behind, pushed to the periphery of society, and there was a sense of apathy amongst them. So when this drawing went on the building, it began a conversation that was in that city, a conversation that was vitally needed because we were losing large numbers of our young men. This is one of the largest pieces that we installed, and this was down in another city, down in the south of Ireland, in Limerick. This piece was 7 stories tall. And you can get a sense of the scale of the piece with the ship and the docks in the background. As I said, I work with young men. And in this city, I had worked with a group of 9 young men. And these 2 lads were best mates. And it was really, really important that both of them occupied a space where one could mind the other. And looking back on the story previous of Halloween, so here is one of those gruesome characters as they went by this piece that was in Galway. Story number 3, equality. In 2015, the Irish government decided it was going to ask the people of Ireland whether they would allow same-sex marriage. Now, this was the first such vote given to the public in the world. It was the first time that any country would ask its people to decide on whether same-sex couples would be allowed to marry. In all previous countries, they had allowed that law to come in through the voting of judges. So it was maybe, the referendum was due to take place in May. And it was around Christmas time, and I was sitting at home, and some of the lads had come up to the house, and they were going, you know, what are you doing, Joe? What's your next project? And I said, I want to make a piece for the referendum that's about to take place. I was teaching history of art because I'm a secondary school teacher. And this is one of the pieces that I was teaching my kids at the time. It is called Meeting on the Turret Stairs, and it's by a really famous Irish artist called Frederick William Burton. This painting was actually voted Ireland's most famous painting a number of years ago. And it's a story, a Danish ballad, where there is a princess, Hela. She falls in love with her bodyguard, a soldier that is in the castle called Hildebrand. Now, her father, who was the king at the time, forbade that union or that marriage from taking place because she was of a higher social standing than he was. So you can see on the steps that are over here, she stands on a higher step than he does. Now, this story or this ballad ended in complete carnage. He was killed by one of her 5 brothers. He killed 4 of them and her father, so it didn't really end well. But it was the perfect analogy or the perfect starting point for what was happening in Ireland at the exact same time. We had a higher power, the state, who was forbidding love, same-sex love, from taking place. So I decided I was going to make this piece. So the drawing is quintessentially Ireland. I got 2 mates of mine who were in a relationship at the time. We photographed them and drew them. This piece, it's held in the National Gallery, and for some ironic reason, it's held behind a closet. So it was like another great analogy in the story. And it's only opened twice a week for 2 hours at a time. And I also put in I don't know, can you see the pointer that's there? I also put in the Claddagh ring. Now, the Claddagh ring was really, really important to Barry at the time. Barry had lost his dad in the weeks previous to this piece being made. His dad had been married to his mum for 27 years. And 27 years when they were together, Barry's mum handed him, Barry's dad, the ring. And the symbol of the ring, it's a very Galway, a very quintessentially Irish ring. If you turn the heart in to your body, that means your love has been taken. And it can be taken through a family member, it can be taken through, kind of your partner. But it was really important that Barry had the ring on at that time. So the drawing was made. I had picked a place in Dublin that I wanted to put it up. It was on a crossroads, the busiest crossroads in the whole of Dublin City. And it was right across from a really well-established gay bar that was in town. So this is it when it went up. Now, we started at 12 o'clock at night, and we finished at 7 o'clock in the morning. Now, the night before I put this up, Dublin City Council, the corporation, the people who were in charge of the city, they rang me, and they told me, if you put that up, we're going to bring you to the High Court. So I was going, okay. I didn't tell anybody until about 6 o'clock in the morning. And I roared down and I told Dad and my best mate, who were on the job with me at the time, and I said, do you know what, we might end up in the High Court. So we said, kind of, in a way I was looking forward to secretly of meeting the judge that was going to give me time. So yeah, it went up. I was wrecked because I was working on this for days previous. And all of a sudden, it went viral. We have a great drag artist in Ireland called Panty Bliss. And Panty Bliss had come to notoriety in the months before the marriage equality referendum took place. And she put up a post of the piece, and within 24 hours it got 1 million clicks. Other artists started to recreate it. The image went on the front of the International New York Times. Every time people, news sites wanted to talk about the subject, this image was used. So it became the image of the referendum, which was remarkable. But it wasn't good enough that I just put the image up in the city, because in all cities, by their very nature, they're progressive. The pace of life is a much quicker pace than down the country. And it was the country vote. It was the vote outside of those urban spaces that were the most important. So I decided that I was going to install a piece that was in a really, really rural and remote place. So we found this castle that was nearly 600 years old. I convinced the man that bought it and renovated it, could I put this piece on the wall? Now, I also want to note, or kind of to mention, that all of the work that I put up is put up using paper and an adhesive that is made from potatoes. Like, that's the most Irish thing that you could possibly that you could possibly use, like paper and potatoes. But it's true. So when these pieces go up, they're quite vivid, but when it's time for them to come down and that they wear off, they don't cause any lasting damage to the sites, because these are monuments of kind of national significance. So we put the piece up, and this piece went on the front cover of the biggest newspaper that's in Ireland, the Irish Times. And it was important that it went on the front cover of that newspaper in the days beforehand, because it might have just, kind of swayed the vote for certain people. And thankfully, 4 days after this piece was up, Ireland voted yes, and we got equality. Now, with this, up until this point, I had been making quite a lot of static images. But with this piece, it was quite important that we made a moving image that went with it to tell the story. So I'd like to show you that piece now.
A small spark can ignite the light and hold it in your heart. But a small thought can put it out and hold you in the dark. When you feel you can't figure out what's real, when you're losing grip and your fingertips are screaming, let go.
whenever I get to this point in the talk or the lecture, the nerves kind of dissipate. That song is stunning, and it just kind of relaxes me into things. So I'm ready to go now. Ireland has two parts. There is the Republic of Ireland and there is Northern Ireland. We have 32 counties in the whole island, but 6 of them are in a space of their own known as Northern Ireland. In Northern Ireland, until just 10 days ago, same-sex marriage was illegal. So we had better rights in the south than our friends, our sisters, our brothers, our cousins, our nieces, our nephews, who lived just miles away. Now, I'm lucky enough that I'm here with my boyfriend tonight, and that is incredible. But also with that, because he is from the north, he had less rights than I had in the south, and I found that disgraceful. So I decided I was going to bring the stuff north and bring the images north after we had won our referendum for same-sex rights. And I installed this piece right smack bang in the middle of Belfast. Now, Northern Ireland is this strange place for a lot of reasons. Sorry, Jonathan. In the north, there is a war that has raged called the Troubles. And that war has raged with 2 groups, a Republican group and a Loyalist group, a group that want Ireland to be a whole island and a group that want the North to stay part of the Union and with Great Britain. But with that, murals became part and parcel of communities, and it was how communities spoke about, kind of what side of the line that they were on. So there was Republican murals and there was Loyalist or Unionist murals. So for me to put a drawing of 2 women kissing was quite soft in comparison to these. But you might have these kind of websites that's over in that kind of take the piss out of stuff that when it goes on, what do you call that? Like kind of satire, that's the word. Come on. So they amended it. So they changed it. So a controversial Northern Ireland mural amended to make it more socially acceptable for the people of the north. So they stuck on a balaclava and an AK-47 and things were fine. There was no problem. We were ready to go. So as I said, 10 days ago, Ireland moved from a place of segregation to a place of whole and a place of entire equality. Story number 4, the volunteers. In 1916, a rebellion led by writers, artists, and poets took place in Dublin. The small force they led were known as the Irish Volunteers and took up arms to end British rule and create an Irish Republic. A group comprising of over 200 women formed an intrinsic part of this army. The rebellion took place on Easter Monday 1916 and lasted just 6 days. Each of the 7 signatories who signed the proclamation were executed by the British Army. 100 years on, I wanted to honor the idea of volunteerism and the importance of volunteerism in contemporary society. So I looked at Ireland and where it was at the time, and I looked at a lot of the social issues that had come to the fore. So I decided I was going to look at 3 main issues where volunteers are incredibly useful. The first one is in mental health, the second one was in drug addiction, and the third one is direct provision. That's what we call the process, or what we do with asylum seekers when they come to Ireland. So the first piece that I'm going to look at is mental health. Now, one of the biggest hurdles for anyone with mental health seeking help for their mental health difficulties is stigma. Stigma, by far, is the biggest wall that those that need help have to climb. So I found two young men. This is Éanna over on this side, and this is Cormac. Éanna was diagnosed with bipolar disorder about 3 years previous to this piece being installed. And he went through a space where he was being watched constantly. Was he too high? Was he too low? Every part of his life was watched. And he hated it because he couldn't live in the way that he wanted. Cormac, on the other side, was and is an incredible volunteer. He does huge work in his community, and I wanted to honor him in the piece. So this was the piece that looked at the question of stigma. And I'd ask you to look at Éanna. Éanna is on his hunkers with his fist that is right in the middle of the floor. So he's in a kind of a tripod formation. But if you took Cormac, who was supporting him, and Éanna is kind of in that support. He's taking on that support. But if you push Cormac completely from that image, Éanna will still be in the same place. He's not going to topple over. He's not going to fall to the ground. So this piece was really important to kind of question, can those with a mental health difficulty, can they survive? Do we suffocate them? How do we go about giving them help? The second part of the volunteer question that I wanted to look at was drug addiction. Unfortunately, addiction has played a role in my life and in my family. And drug addiction in Ireland is dealt with in the criminal justice system rather than in what I believe should be the health system. So I went about recruiting a number of people that were in the world that was around drug addiction. I recruited Lynn Ruane, who is an Irish senator. Now, if you take on any word that I say of today, please have a look at this lady. She is mesmerizingly brilliant. She is a young woman who comes from the outskirts of the city, who fell into use of drugs, who had her first child at the age of 15 and now has two beautiful kids, but didn't use her struggles and the place in which she was born, her postal code, to dictate her life. She now sits in government and is a phenomenal force. The second person is Fiona. Now, Fiona is a nurse and has been a nurse in the streets for about 25 years. She runs a mobile ambulance which travels around Dublin City and offers medical intervention to those on the streets. Rachel, who's in the top right-hand corner, is that you or right? I'm brutal bad on left and right, sorry. Rachel is in the top right. Now, Rachel, 11 years ago, was a heroin addict, and she has been clean, and became kind of one of the internet sensations when the internet kind of hit Ireland. She was a beautiful 15-year-old girl, but had suffered so much with injections in her forearms that she had two big kind of black rotted sores. And that video kind of went, or that photograph went right across Ireland as a 15-year-old young girl who was injecting so much that the flesh on her forearms started to rot off. She pleaded for a bed in a recovery center, and took years, even after going public, to get that attention. Now, in Ireland, we have 20,000 drug addicts, and at present, we have 36 treatment beds. And 76% of our population in the prisons are from drug addiction or drug criminality. So, where better to put up a drawing about drug addiction than Trinity College, an institution that is 427 years old, I remember walking in the door and having a meeting with the provost or the president's council. And they said, we'd love to work with you, Joe. What would you like to do? And I says, I want to put up a piece on drug addiction. Well, it took maybe 10 minutes to lift their jaws from the floor. But it was important that the conversation and that the image was willing to talk about addiction. So what you have here is Rachel. Can you see her that's there? Rachel is looking out. She is the only one that is looking out at the viewer. So she's looking out to each and every person that confronts this piece and is there questioning. So what do you believe the value and the worth of her life? Here is Lynn. Now Lynn was dressed, we found this old, to commemorate the rebellion of 100 years ago, we found this old bomb carrier. Now, as I said, there was 200 women that were part of the Revolutionary Army. And what they used to do is transport bombs in their undergarments. So they used to wear these big skirts. So this was a bomb carrier. So Lynn carries that bomb, but we took the bomb out of it and we put in a bill, a piece of legislation. Up in the back corner, we can see it a little bit clearly here, is Fiona. Now Fiona is a nurse, and it turns out that she did a bit of digging into her family history, and it was actually her great-granny that used to make bombs for the rebellion, which is great. So she wears one of the pins that her grandmother had. And she is pulling the character that is the doctor, or that kind of perceived static, old-fashioned health system, and pulling him into the conversation. So I'd like to show you, again, previous we made a film for the equality piece, and I'd like to show you a short film on this drug addiction piece.
There is a prologue to each of us. My history is a drawn line that stretches behind me endlessly. In front of me, unwritten possibility. The volunteers, mostly in their 20s, from all the various walks, laden with the burden of their centuries. The tall pillars still hold the scars of their battles as they hold up the roof. Those elemental arms of survival. In the face of all this sorrow, we offer our work as our proof. I saw addiction grow in the soil of trauma, a neighborhood inheritance, poverty and circumstance, a gnawing of loneliness, an ache clawed of holiness, only some howling chemistry lightened. It was angry and bottomless, and it wrapped like a lover, then tightened and strangled, it smothered, and to others that fearsome illness turned me criminal. Here, the ill are shamed, as though their illness is earned. Marched through halls of justice, as though we haven't learned that they are already in a prison of their own pain. And treatment is in the reign of another neighborhood. St. Christopher, the burden bearer, did as he could. He crossed the river carrying a weight heavy as the world. He said, "Go your way in safety. Go on reassured." The ink is stark and black and white. The words all seem dry at a glance, but their truth is a chance. What they mean is a life. These stones hold the echo of old explosions, but they hold sounds of us stacking them too. We'll mix mortar with sweat and dust from the rubble of sorrow. See what we can do. There are bombs we can make with ink and with paper. A bill, a voice articulated. A truth as plain as a picture on a wall. They hammer out a proclamation for us all. And in every cross-hatched line, the message, life in all its walks, is precious. A country reworked for the better. A path drawn in line and in letter. A prophecy that's built on our presence and made of our time. A life we can look in the eye as we rise. We inhale possibility, we exhale it as hope. Grateful to the last for the breath as it goes. Our great cause is to cause an effect. We will let no life be worthless. We will let no life be worthless. The new volunteers, a nation reflected, its warrior creed. Be fierce in compassion and believe.
Story number 5, consent. Now, I want to introduce you to 3 of my kids. I'm a secondary school teacher, and I'm in school generally Monday to Friday, 8:30 until 5 o'clock. Generally not 8:30 because I'm very late in the mornings. And these are my favorites. Now, you're not meant to have favorite children, and please block this on the recordings. But this is Duck, Shakira, and Nicole. And they are both the best part of my day and the worst part of my day. They come into my art room at break time and lunchtime. I have a microwave and a fridge that's in the corner, and they've taken it over. I actually have no space in the fridge anymore. The microwave is full of pot noodle and like whatever other random stuff that they use. But they inform, like a lot of my students, inform the work that I produce. So they arrived into my class like 3 of the most angriest entities that you could imagine. It came up on their phones in the morning that there was a young girl down in Cork who had been raped. And the lawyer in the case had taken her knickers, her black laced knickers, and held them in front of the entire courtroom and insinuated that because they were black and because there was a lace on the front of it, that she was asking for it. Now my kids, them 3 girls, came running into the room, and there was a gang of lads. Now God bless them. They were over in the corner. And they came in and they demanded that the lads take off their jocks or their boxers and laid them out on the table, and that they were going to decide who was the gamiest one of them because of what they were wearing. Now, when you pick people and friends to hang around with, these 3 women are the best that I could pick. Now, they came to me, and it's important that I get this right. Consent should be freely given, enthusiastic, clearly communicated, and ongoing throughout. Never assume consent. And that is what they taught me. So I was sitting there and I was watching and going, okay, well, how do I take part in this conversation with them? So I looked online, and we had a great member of Parliament who walked in the days afterwards into our House of Parliament and held up a similar pair of knickers and questioned our Prime Minister, our Taoiseach, as to why this was good enough. We had huge rallies in Dublin City where women held up their knickers and said, am I asking for it because of this is what I wear? So I looked at myself and I was going, okay, well, how do I take part in this conversation? I have never been raped. But I have on 2 occasions been the first person that 2 young ladies have told that they had been raped. And I hid that away And I put it in the back of my head, and I was like, okay, well, that's how I deal with it. But that wasn't good enough. So I decided I was going to help my kids. And we started to create something that was to go on social media. Silence means no, crying means no, passed out means no, I'm not ready means no, pushing you away means no, don't means no, screaming means no, I don't feel like it means no, I don't want to means no, turning away means no, leave me alone means no, stop means no. As you may have seen, very little, if any, text permeates my drawing. But my drawings were not strong enough to not have a piece of text that went with them. So I worked with a feminist writer in Ireland, and we decided if you looked at consent, it broke down into two separate categories. The idea that the person is not able, they couldn't say no, and the idea that they said no through words or through action. So we installed this piece down in Waterford during a street art festival, and a number of weeks later, we installed the same piece with the additional writing that was on it, and a really famous and a really important gallery in Dublin City. And this is a former student of mine, the actual girl that is in the image, who helped me install the piece. So it was quite important that I made this piece for the young women that were in my classroom, but it was always also extremely important that I used a young woman to be part of the image that I knew, a female photographer, and then a feminist writer when we were deciding what the text was going to be. Story number 6, finding power. Now, I am in the street art world, and by its very nature, it's subversive. So when I got a message from the National Gallery of Ireland going, we'd like you to put some up in our space in a building that has been closed for the past 7 years as it undergone renovation, and we want you to be one of the first contemporary Irish artists that install work in here. As you can imagine, I didn't believe the email or the contact when it came through. And when it came through, I was kind of blindsided. When a big institution asks you to make work, I panicked, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I took out my sketchbook, and I was asked to make work in response to a great artist called Frederick William Burton. So I went into the gallery on many, many days and drew for hours, but didn't have a clue what I was drawing, didn't know what I was doing, didn't understand the man, didn't understand his work. And it wasn't until one of my friends, Sinead Burke, who is a little person, came into the gallery, and I was talking to her about the undertaking that I had been given and the weeks and weeks of drawing that was going no place. So we looked at the man, and Burton had a strange sort of a gathering of people that was around him. His work was real straight-laced, and him in his place, in his position, he was quite, kind of regular. But the people that he had around him were like really alternative and others. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was the position that I was really interested in, and that's where I wanted to go with the project. Rather than what he produced as artwork, more so who he was as a man and the type of people that he had around him. Now, he came or was around in the era of maybe the late 1880s. So to have a collection of women that was around him who he saw as equal was quite pioneering for him. So I decided, okay, well, if I was to take Ireland at present, and I was to take 7 individuals from every breadth of the Irish landscape, who would I take? So the first person was obviously my friend Sinead Burke, who is a little person. And in her work as an advocate for disability, she talks of access to the ATM in Dublin City. She can't access the ATM because it's too high, and how design has inhibited her world. Fashion is not made for her. If she goes to use a toilet, she can't use the disabled toilet because it's up at such a height, so she has to climb on the side of it. She can't lock the door. When she goes to the airport and they ask her to put her bag up, the security lads, she's there looking, going, I can't do that, because the design of the space doesn't fit for her. So when Sinead came in, we went running around the gallery, as you do with your mate, and we got into all these little cubby holes, and security were going like crazy, going, get out of there. And we found this great pedestal. And the pedestal was the perfect symbol for what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about power, and who deserved that power, and who could get onto that pedestal, who was given that pedestal. So I looked at other pedestals. If you've ever been to Trafalgar Square, there is the fourth plinth, that there's nothing on it, and a lot of artists have put their own understanding of things onto it. So I decided to draw out different characters and went with Stephen in the end. So this was the drawing of Stephen, and we omitted the pedestal from it. And then this is it as it's installed. Now, from the gallery, this is the old section of the gallery, this is the new section of the gallery. Before the refurbishment, they used to drive a truck in the middle in there, and that was just a loading bay. So it's this beautiful, quiet space as you move from one gallery into the next gallery, and you can sit down and have a look. Now, Finding Power was a really interesting project, and the gallery have acquired it subsequently. Now, it was a really important project for a number of reasons. As I said, this is Sinead's work. There is no little person in the gallery's collection. And it was important that she stood on the pedestal with an access, little kind of step up, and in the doors of a large lift, so she could get access to the top floors. This is Jad. Jad came to Ireland from Syria as a refugee. He came on his own. He knew nobody that was here. He was put in a single bedroom house, and he was told, get on with life. So that's him, kind of looking for community, looking for his own power, looking for his place within society. That's the first time a refugee has come or has been in the national collection. This is Davina Devine. Davina Devine is a great mate of mine. Davina is a drag artist, and this is a dual portrait of a single person. It's the first time a drag artist has been in the national collection. And this is Chidi Mujeke. Chidi is the mother of two boys that I have taught. Chidi came to Ireland 11 years ago and has eked out a living. And when this photograph was taken, she was looking for refugee status in Ireland. So she is the first refugee that has come from Africa that has been in the national collection. So there was a lot of firsts in this piece, and I'm really, really thankful for the National Gallery that 4 of the firsts and 4 of the types of people that should be in our collection, in our state-owned collection, is now in the gallery. Story number 7, and our last story, Save Nonso. Nonso Mujeke is Chidi's youngest boy. And Nonso Mujeke came to Ireland when he was 2.5 and lived in Ireland for 11 years. After 11 years as a 14-year-old boy, the Department of Justice issued him with a deportation order. They wanted to send him back to his home country, to a country that he had forgotten or did not know the language, the culture. He could speak better Irish than I could. So as a community and as a school, led by the children in the school, we mounted a campaign. We got 22,000 signatories on a petition. We haunted every government minister that you could possibly get to. And we changed his future. So here was a boy that was due to be deported, due to be sent back to a place that he did not know. And through the interaction of young people within his community, Nonso now lives with his family, with his mother and father, and get to stay in Ireland and make my life and Ireland a much better place. So I'd like you to show you the video in my classroom of my kids as they found out that Nonso was staying. Please listen to their words and listen to their wisdom, but most importantly, listen to their empathy.
Joy and relief at Tullamore College this morning, and a big welcome from classmates for 14-year-old Nonso Mujeke. It was a campaign by these students and the whole of the school that galvanised the community in support of Nonso and his family. Petitions, protests and political support. Yesterday, Minister for Justice Charlie Flanagan confirmed that he had granted Nonso and his family leave to remain.
I don't think I could ask for better friends than you guys are. You guys were with me throughout everything, and like you didn't turn your backs on me on anything. You were there, supportful, helping me and my family the whole way. And I'm really thankful for you guys for that.
His classmates' campaign is now at an end.
Like, we love Nonso and it's important for us that he stays, and yeah.
And you're happy? No, you don't look it. Nonso's mother fled Nigeria with her 2 sons after her husband died in 2006. Nonso was just 2. She said in her asylum application that her husband's death had placed her and her children in danger. But that application was rejected, a deportation order was served, subsequent appeals failed, and a last deportation order came last June.
I feel like it doesn't matter who it is. We all have to stick together and we all have to fight for our rights. I feel like it was unfair what they were doing to Nonso, so we all grouped together and we fought for rights.
And you won?
Yeah.
I'm not just happy for Nonso, Victor and his mother. I'm happy for me, I'm happy for my friends, I'm happy for the school, I'm happy for our entire community. Nonso's just such a vital part of it, and I just couldn't imagine life without him.
Emma O'Kelly, RTE News, Tullamore College.
In the weeks after Nonso was given leave to remain, that he was allowed to stay in the country, those students won the Red Cross Award for young people in Ireland. And we teach a subject called Civil, Political, Social Education. And they brought out a new book this year. And this case and Nonso and the work that the students did is in that book, which is staggering. So I'd like to finish off on a last slide. I've talked about 7 stories, some with a deep meaning, some with a social issue that I felt needed a different vista, a different viewpoint, and maybe needed to change. So I'd ask you, what fucks you off? What gets into every nuance of your body? What do you look at and know deep down is wrong? What can you do to change that? And again, I came with the premise that I was going to say, is street art capable of advancing a society? And I hope in some way I have aided you in answering that question. Thank you.